while I have everyone here, and I'm sure there's hundreds of people watching, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for all they're doing to prevent and control COVID-19 in the county of Brant. I appreciate all your efforts. And I'd like to thank the staff for all they're doing. We're in very good shape, and I think it's just because we haven't let down our guard. So thank you all. And this time, I'd like to remind you of the rules of tonight's meeting, and that is to stay muted when you're not speaking, please. Stay muted when you're not speaking. Councillor Wheat, would you make sure that your fire,
I'm supposed to be muted.
Your fire communication is turned off, since you don't mute your, you're turned off?
I don't know how to turn it off.
No,
I'll do the best I can when it happens.
Thank you.
I'll deal with it.
Thank you. So when you're not speaking, we're muted. If there's anything you'd like to say, please raise your hand. I'll keep track of hands and you'll speak in that order, please. If for whatever reason you get cut off of this call, please just try to get back in again. We'll pause the meeting for 5 minutes, 6 minutes, whatever it takes. If you can't get back in, since we do have quorum tonight, we'll continue the meeting. Are there any questions before we begin? Seeing none, the first thing on the agenda is to take attendance. I'm going to take attendance now, please. Number 1 on your agenda, and it is Councillor McAlpine.
Here.
Councillor Wheat.
Present.
Councillor Ferrier.
Here.
Councillor Howes.
Here.
Councillor Bell.
Present.
Councillor Pierce.
Present.
Councillor Chambers.
I believe Councillor Chambers is maybe late or maybe unable to attend.
Okay. Councillor Miller, please.
Present.
Councillor Coleman.
Here.
And Councillor Gatward.
Present.
Thank you. The second thing on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, please. Councillor Howes.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Bell that the agenda and addendum for the County of Brant Special Council meeting of October 6, 2020 be approved.
Thank you. Are there any additions? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor of accepting the agenda the way it's presented? Opposed? Carried, please. Declaration of pecuniary interests. If there are any, you could say so now, please. Seeing none, we'll move on. Delegations, there's none. Planning Act applications. Matt, please.
Thanks very much. Tonight we'll be hearing from planning staff regarding 3 forms of reports. The first, Planning Act applications, initial public meeting presentations will focus on new planning applications that have been received and are being presented to council with the intent to provide information about and receive public input on the application. The second, Planning Act applications, statutory public hearings will focus on the planning reports with staff recommendations for applications that have either been presented to council before as information or are exempt from the initial presentation process. The third set of reports will focus on county-initiated planning policy projects to be received as information and seeking support with the associated work plans and timelines. Tonight, there are 2 initial public meeting presentations, 8 statutory public hearings, and 3 policy-related projects for council's consideration. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Matt before we begin? Seeing none, we'll move on. Matt, the first one, please, regarding 17 Washington Street.
Thank you. The applicant is proposing to rezone portions of the existing church from heritage area residential singles and semis to heritage area open space. This rezoning will require in order to facilitate the addition of a church parish hall and to allow for site-specific provisions. The applicant is seeking site-specific provisions for reduced street setbacks along Main Street, reduced interior side yard setbacks from lots fronting onto Dumfries Street, reduced interior side yard setbacks for an accessory structure, reduced parking setbacks, and reduced required parking. A pre-consultation meeting was held in April of this year. The applicant has submitted a planning justification report as well as a site plan. Staff also note the Heritage Committee has been circulated and will include their comments as part of our recommendation report. If there's any questions, please let us know.
You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. Did you want me to make my presentations? Rob Van Porten from.
I think he's just trying to get off mute here. Bear with him.
Okay, I'm now off mute. Before we begin, I will declare this public meeting open and ask if there's an applicant to support this application, and that would be you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Rob Van Porten, JH Cahoon Engineering Limited. As the planner rightfully noted, this application is really twofold. The first one is to consistently zone the Sacred Heart Church property all as Heritage Open Space 1, noting that the current zoning of the parking lot, the manse, and a little bit of other property is actually zoned residential. So the first portion of the application is to rezone the church property as it now constitutes into one consistent zone. The second application is to amend the open space 1 zone or modify the open space zone to allow for the construction of a parish hall, office, and meeting rooms, which will be joined to the back of the existing church building. We certainly are cognizant of the fact that the property is in a heritage designation, that the church property in itself is very important to the neighborhood and the community because of its heritage aspects. And we have retained, or an architect has been retained, to provide the county with renderings for what the addition will look like. We anticipate that as the project is subject to site plan control, more modifications may be necessary, and certainly in consultation with the Heritage Committee. The application, the principal part of the modification is to allow the parish hall to be set back at a 0 setback from Main Street, which would be in line with the existing church building. Another portion of the rezoning is to increase the available parking from the current 30 spaces to 39 spaces, which includes 6 disabled spaces. None, I don't believe there are any disabled spaces on the church property present. Another aspect would be to allow some minor modifications to the setback in relationship to surrounding properties. And those are all itemized in our planning justification. Mr. Mayor, I'm available for questions. I believe Bob Phillips and the architect may also be somewhere electronically. I don't see them on the screen. I can respond to questions, and if there are technical issues, speak up, and maybe Mr. Phillips will show himself. Thank you.
I see him on my screens.
Okay.
He is here. Are there any questions to the application? Councillor Pierce, you're first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. My biggest concern with this is the parking spaces. It's being reduced from 81 parking spaces to 33. As we well know, parking is at a premium around Sacred Heart Church. And now with having what would be suggested as potentially an auditorium space added on to it, there's going to be more vehicles. I'm just trying to understand what sort of discussions have been had in regards to the parking issues that we have already, and then reducing more parking spaces.
Mr. Mayor, through
Rob,
you.
want to-
Mr. Mayor, through you, we are in fact increasing the available parking. Currently, there are 30 spaces on site, and we're increasing that to 39. We certainly are cognizant of the fact that under certain circumstances, at certain times, during church services or major holidays, there may be certainly on-street parking issues. We're trying to improve it as best we can. We, in fact, are providing additional parking lot off of Dumfries Street. You are quite correct that the theoretical parking space for the church is considerably higher than what is currently being proposed. But I think you also must appreciate that in all likelihood, the church and or the parish hall will not be used at the same time. Generally, the congregation may move into the parish hall from the church, so I don't see the both venues being used at the same time. As I indicated, Mr. Phillips and the architect are somewhere online, so perhaps they can add to my presentation to further ameliorate your concerns.
Just for the information of council, the current occupant load of the church is going to remain unchanged. So, yes, virtually no parking today, but overall there'll be an increase in the parking as we formalize the plans.
Councillor Pierce, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, follow up if I could. Okay, I appreciate what you're saying here, guys, but if we're building this parish hall on there, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that potentially now if there's a wedding at the church, there might be some sort of reception in that parish hall. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, the proposal would be that the ceremony would occur in the church and the same people would move into the parish hall.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. So as it is right now, there's special exemption for parking on Sundays, Saturday evenings and Sundays for church services. I would assume that wedding ceremonies would be at different times. Would they be looking to get exemptions for those times as well?
That's to date, we haven't discussed that at all with the owner, and I believe he's in your meeting room. He may want to pop in and have a discussion about that, but that's certainly something we can work out with staff going forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bell, you're next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, I was just going to question the parking numbers because, at least in my observation, the numbers were going up. So I guess the Cahoon folks have confirmed that. Just a general question. We're going to build on heritage area open space. I can imagine that when the original church was built 170 years ago, it wasn't an issue. Could somebody from staff explain to me what's possible in heritage area open space?
Who wants to speak to Councillor Bell?
I will start off, Mr. Mayor. The open space zone is in fact I'm going to call it the institutional zone of the county bylaw. So even though it may be zoned open space, that zoning category also allows institutions such as places of worship, schools, etc. So that is in the overall zoning nomenclature, that is in fact the institutional zone.
Councillor Bell, you're good with that? Any other questions to the presenter? Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Phillips. The mention of the manse being changed from residential to open space, was I correct in hearing that?
Maybe I can respond because it appeared, I think it's a planning question. The manse is in fact an accessory use to the church and should in fact be under the same zoning as the church category. And in fact, a manse is identified within the definition of place of worship as a component of the church. So it's not residential in the sense that you would see somebody other than a principal of the church being occupied in that building. So it rightfully should be zoned in the same zoning category as the church.
And someone, thank you, Mr. Mayor, someone does live there, whether it's the church priest or whether it's officials of the church, it still is a residence. I guess my next question would be for staff, so I'll leave it at that because I have more questions about that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of the presenter? Seeing none. Heather, is there anyone here from the public that wants to speak? Two or,
I don't have any members of the public who have asked to speak to this now.
all right. No other questions from council regarding this application? Seeing none, we'll declare this public meeting closed. And what do you want to do with it? Councillor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is moved by myself. Unfortunately, Councillor Chambers is not here, so I will need a seconder.
Taking a seconder, Councillor House. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Howes that the presentation made regarding ZBA 31/20/AW be received as information and referred to staff for consideration as part of the recommendation report.
Thank you. Any questions before we call the vote? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor to receive? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Number 5B, please. 526 Scenic Drive, Matt.
Thank you. The applicant is proposing to rezone a portion of the subject lands from agriculture to rural residential to be aligned with the county of Brant official land and to facilitate the creation of 2 new residential building lots. Staff note that portions of the property have been identified as woodland and vegetation. The applicants are also proposing a site-specific provision for one of the severed lots for an increased interior side yard setback of 10 meters, whereas only 5 meters is required. This increased side yard setback would ensure a proposed dwelling is located outside of the required MDS separation formula. A pre-consultation meeting was held in March of this year. The applicant has submitted an environmental impact study, an MDS report, a site plan, and a tree protection plan, as well as a well pump test. I believe the agent, Scott Patterson, is in attendance for questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Scott? Are there any members here representing the application? Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Scott Patterson and Mr. Sean O'Neill are here for the applicants.
Okay, so everyone's clear. There's no questions to the applicant? Seeing none, are there any members of the public that are here speaking against the application or for the application?
I have none on my list, no.
All right, so we're clear. There are no questions. Okay, we'll call the meeting closed. How do you want to handle this, Councillor Miller?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This one is moved by myself, second by Councillor Coleman, that the presentations made regarding applications ZBA 24/20/AW be received as information and referred to staff for consideration as part of the recommendation report.
Thanks, Councillor Miller. Are there any other questions or concerns? Councillor Ferrier, please first.
Yes, question to staff. There's correspondence from a resident, and I'm just wondering if staff have replied to the resident and about the concerns and if any of them are addressable. Also, is it possible for us to see any of that correspondence when it happens? And that's a continuing question because we do have a lot of emails like that throughout this package where I'm interested in to know the answers provided to residents as well.
Yeah, through the chair, I can confirm I have replied to that resident who sought clarification on the application, and I would be happy to provide that correspondence to you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was that staff have stated that the application meets MDS, and the same correspondence that Councillor Laferriere was just referring to. The resident was approached and they wanted her to put her horse somewhere else. I'm not sure how many horses or whether the MDS was calculated by this particular property or not, we don't know that information. So I would like to know the same thing as Councillor Laferriere, that these questions that are raised in this letter from 280 East River Road have been answered and what the answers are. And was MDS calculated to this property or some other property? As I'm not really familiar with East River Road or Scenic Drive. Thank you.
Okay, I think staff has answered that question, that they have responded to the correspondence and that we'll know any correspondence that comes forward because of that. Everyone's okay with that? Okay, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Number 6, Matt.
Thank you. So tonight we'll be considering 8 Planning Act applications with recommendations for approval. The Shared Network Canada and Vacano applications were presented previously for input and information to inform the staff report. The additional residential unit application was introduced as a policy item at our last meeting, and the remainder of the applications are exempt from needing an information meeting because they're either temporary use, a minor boundary adjustment, or for the purposes of placing a holding on a property.
Is there anyone here to represent the application? Madam Clerk?
Yes, Howard Snodgrass and Mr. Azevedo are here tonight in person.
To answer any questions?
I believe Mr. Snodgrass had a presentation.
All right, Mr. Snodgrass.
Are we set up?
We are, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I have some overhead slides and I trust they're on display. The first one shows the location of the subject property on Pleasant Ridge Road. And if you'll note, it's to the rear of an existing residence. The next slide shows the existing zoning. And you'll note it's agriculture. The next slide shows the intended operations, and it's to be to the rear of the proposed lot line adjustment of 10 acres. It's going to be added to the 4 acres and change residential lot out front. So we'll make an entire property of approximately 14 acres and change. The livestock barns will be built at the rear. And if you take reference or make reference to the middle portion of your photograph, you will see the MDS is fully complied with. Next slide shows the actual MDS calculation. And that's where the 163 meters or so comes in. The next slide is an additional MDS calculation that shows further expansion is capable, meaning if you start with 20,000 birds, the second MDS shows 40,000 and there's still full compliance. The next slide is an extract from an email received from Al Dan, who's the poultry specialist with OMAFRA, indicating he's in full support. The next slide is an enlargement of one of the previous slides showing the livestock barn, and there was a letter of concern that came into the Committee of Adjustment meeting. I'm not sure if it's on the agenda tonight, but the long and short is the poultry farm is a permitted use. The poultry farm has been justified. We meet MDS, and the proposed manure pit is all the way from the neighbor's residence. The next slide shows reasons for approval. Again, the poultry farm is viable and is a permitted use. The business synopsis has been prepared and accepted. The farm meets MDS, complies with the PPS and the growth plan, complies with the county OP and the zoning bylaw. Planning staff are supportive. It's been peer reviewed and my firm's in agreement with it as well. That's the extent I was proposing to go through at this point. I have a couple of additional slides if there's any questions or if concerns are come up about the one condition imposed by the committee. I'm prepared to speak to it, but for the time being, that's the extent of my input.
Thank you, Mr. Snodgrass. Since this is a public meeting, I just want the clerk to note that I've declared it open. Thank you. Are there any questions to Mr. Snodgrass? Mr. Miller first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Howard. Howard, thank you. Two questions. You went through your slides kind of quick, and what was the MDS for 20,000 poultry?
I believe it's 163 meters.
For 20,000, and what was the MDS for 40,000?
It's slightly less. It's just under 150. It's based on the assumption that once the building's there, if it's expanded, it can go down. That's the way the MDS formula works. It doesn't necessarily mean it increases. Whereas if you took 40,000 initially, the calculation is actually up closer to 200 meters. That's just the way the formula works.
Okay, yeah, I know. I thought that was kind of odd that the MDS went down when the number of birds went up, but
like I said, that's just the way the formula works.
I'll leave it at that. And the second question, and I guess you are anticipating this, and maybe my north, south, east, west is a bit off on this one, but it looks like the barn is going on the north side of the property. And my question is, why couldn't it go on the south side of the property?
There's really no reason. It was just that's where we had chosen to put it on the northerly side of the 10 acres to be added. But if there is a reason for the southerly, that would still work for us. The assumption is there's going to be probably more than one poultry barn built on here. But the reason we started at the north side was we wanted to choose a property line and work from that.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you. Thank you, Howard.
Councillor Gatward, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, the diagram I'm looking at, the barn would be on the southerly property line, not the northerly. But my question is this application for one barn or two? And the next question, on one of your slides, Mr. Snodgrass, you indicated a manure pit, and it showed 13.7 meters by, is it 16.7 meters? And that is, pardon?
That sounds correct, yes.
So are you aware, Mr. Snodgrass, that this barn is within our source water protection area for the Ellis Ave water wells that the county operates?
I'm not aware of that.
Well, it is. I checked on that today, and I received a map from our water manager that shows the source water protection area for the Ellis Ave water system. And so your client, as I understand it, will have to work with the nutrient management plan and the county consultant who is hired to protect our water systems as far as his manure storage is concerned. I was under the understanding that it would only be a small amount of storage and that the manure would be trucked off of site. Do you know the answer to that?
Yes, I do. The nutrient management plan still has to be completed. And in terms of the water protection measures, that's where we would expect it to be dealt with. In terms of the manure that's going to be generated here, it'll probably be sold to what we could call a manure broker, who's an individual that buys the manure, removes it, and then resells it to other neighboring or farmers in the general area. So you're quite correct in assuming that it's a very short timeline, that it's stored on the concrete pad. And the expectation of the nutrient management plan regarding storage is there should be no runoff onto the neighboring or the immediate lands.
Thank you. And so that will be addressed because we
Yes.
certainly don't want to pollute the Mount Pleasant water system. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bell, you're next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Snodgrass, how many traffic movements do you expect this new venture will bring? And do we need to do any work at the entrance to 341 Pleasant Ridge Road's access way onto Pleasant Ridge Road?
Just one moment, sir.
Yes, I would ask for a new laneway.
Okay. In answer to your question, Mr. Bell, there will be one laneway, a new one for farm access. And the assumption is I can't give you an exact volume of trucks right now, but if we're looking at 6 or 7 or 8 poultry crops per year, it'll be busy for maybe a couple days every month and a half or so.
You're okay with that, Councillor Bell? Are there any other questions for Mr. Snodgrass? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation. Heather, are there any members of the public here that want to speak against or for the application?
No, I have no one online.
Okay, seeing none. No other questions, council, to the presenter? Seeing none, we will declare this meeting closed. Councillor Gatward, what do you want to do with this, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Wheat that application ZBA 2009 AW from John Azevedo for property located at 341 Mount Pleasant Road be approved as outlined in the staff report.
Thank you. Everyone's clear. Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We're going to Mcmillan Road, please. For Mcmillan Road, Matt.
Mr. Mayor,
Who said that? Okay,
I think that was just Howard saying thank you.
all right.
So for RPT 20114, there is no presentations. The staff report has been included in the council agenda package, and staff are available for questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Are there any questions for Matt? Seeing none, Councillor McAlpine.
Moved by myself.
Councillor McAlpine, before you begin, I'm sorry, this is a public meeting. I need to call it open before I can close it. Is there anyone from the public to speak against this report? Heather?
Well, first, Mr. Van Poort and Mr. Phillips are here for the applicant if there's any questions for them.
I don't think there were. Are there any questions for the applicant? I think I asked and there weren't any.
Okay, and then there's no one here from the public.
All right. So we'll declare this public hearing closed then, please, and we'll call the vote. Councillor McAlpine, yeah.
Want me to make the motion first?
Yes, please.
Moved by myself, second by Councillor LaFerrier, the application ZBA 27-20-AW from Gregory Maritimes and Lisa Handel for property located at 4 Mcmillan Road be approved as outlined in staff report RPT-20-114.
Everyone's clear on what they're voting on? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 6C, 32 to 34 Dundas Street West. Matt.
Thank you. Again, no presentation. The staff report's been included in council's agenda package, and staff are available for questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you. Again, this is a public meeting, so we'll call it open. Are there any questions to staff? Councillor House first, please.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I had a question for the applicant, but I guess that comes later or now.
No, now, please.
Okay, thank you. It's a comment and a question to Mr. de St. Croix. Hope I said that right. He coached us earlier. Your project is a great example of renovating an old building rather than tearing it down and starting over. And we really like it when that happens. I believe the closest neighbor attached to this building is the oldest building in Paris. So that makes the efforts of this applicant even more significant. This building has never looked better, in my opinion. The property was commercial on the bottom and residential on the top for decades. So I fully support this application. My question for the applicant is a simple one. I know there are members of our Heritage Committee who will be very pleased to see what you have done with this building. And would you mind please sending in some photos of the inside and the outside so that Councillor McAlpine and I can share them with other members of the Heritage Committee?
Hello, this is Dean and my wife Holly. Absolutely, we'd love to show you around. Unfortunately, with COVID, we can't have you over, but we'll get some pictures together and send them over right away.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I would concur with the comments from the Heritage Committee that the area looks, that the owner looks like they've been doing a good job. I drive by it. I think most of us do on a regular basis, and it's looking fabulous. So just to concur with Councillor House as well. I would also concur with the Development Engineering Department regarding parking. I know the parking lot's a little bit wonky. And I'm just wondering, and this might be through to the planner, but has the applicant obtained a traffic assessment letter? I didn't see one in our package, and I'm just wondering if one is available or been produced.
We didn't receive that yet, no.
As in you are looking to get it done, or have you are you working on it?
Yes, we're working on it right now. We've had response from the planning department for the minimum number of spaces required. So that is our first step, but as far as the traffic letter goes, we're working on that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bell?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the applicant. Two questions. Why are you doing it now and not before the bakery opened? Not that I mind overly, because the bakery clearly is doing a great job. But is this a catch-up job for you?
Holly can speak to
that. 2 points to answer that question. First of all, it's only just with the current report from council that we've been able to determine how many spots are required for our business operations. Prior to that, the parking had been under review with the county office. So now that we're able to act on how many spaces we need, we'll be able to create a parking lot that will flow appropriately for public use. And the answer to why the bakery opened prior to the parking lot being completed was mainly because we knew we had ample parking, and well.
And as far as the application goes, unfortunately, with the current situation with COVID and delay from a business standpoint, we decided to move forward because of the inherent risks with waiting a little bit longer.
Yeah, thank you. I think that generally we discourage people doing things before they have permission. That's just a general point. I don't think there's a world-shattering event here. Other question, why are you only going for a temporary use permit here?
Well, actually, with discussions with the planning department, initially, they had advised us that we were in line with their plans for the future, and they wanted to kind of preemptively talk to us about what we wanted to do with the space, to get an idea of what was going to happen in the neighborhood in relationship to the renovation plan that they are talking for the old City Hall. So the discussions that we had with them over the last year indicated, they suggested actually that they were looking to review the zoning of the area anyway. So they suggested for us to get a temporary zoning for our building, and then within 3 or 4 years, they would reassess the area and determine next steps. So it was actually kind of a goodwill call on their part to share that information with us.
Thank you. I hope we don't charge you twice when you come along in 3 years' time for another zoning permit. Thank you.
I hope not.
Are there any other questions to the applicant? Councillor LaFerriere, please.
And just a quick comment. I really appreciate the nature of the application and what they've been doing over a long period of time. I think we met briefly 2-3 years ago when this was being discussed, and it's wonderful. I also have to say, and I'm being a bit humorous here, but you know, a lot of us tend to go around to areas that are being proposed for planning to see it for ourselves. Well, it was a very delicious research meeting this time around, as opposed to others. My quick question is about the window between spaces on the bottom. Is that something that can be changed, or is there a reason why that's there? And are there any potential issues with different uses over time with the sort of window walls throughout the bottom floor?
There, as far as building permit and fire barriers go, we're within the regulations right now. We didn't really know what we were going to use the space for and wanted to keep it open if we wanted to use the entire bottom space. We also had some future plans that would include business meetings and or using the studio as a gallery space for limited functions. And we could roll up the window at that time to allow overflow and or use of the bakery as a gathering area. So that was the original intent. The building itself with the glass wall meets the building code currently, so we're within the code that way.
Okay, thank you. The quality of the work and the obvious care, I think we're going to look 20 years from now and say that this was the start of something very special on Dundas Street as an entire area in Portal. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's just, if I can add, it's our intent to be a part of the community. We've both been a part of the community since we were born, whether that's Brantford and Paris. So we do intend to contribute, and we wanted to add something that was a little bit more locally relative. And we also were very lucky that despite the outward appearance of the old Paris variety, underneath, after some fixing up, the building itself is quite a significantly quality building from when it was built by Mr. Patterson in 1907 or 1914. So we were lucky that way.
Councillor Wheat, did you have a question?
No.
No? Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I had the pleasure of being in the building today. I was masked and I got to look through the glass wall, and I was, even under the critical eye of this mayor, I was duly impressed. I think you've done an amazing job. You're a wonderful fit for that building. So thank you for what you've done and what you're going to do in the future. With that being said, Councillor Bell, what do you want to do with this? Oh, Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question through you to staff regarding this recommendation. We've heard many good things. Why does it have to be temporary? Why can't we approve it as a final zone change?
Staff, who's going to answer that for Councillor Gatward?
Thank you. Through the mayor, the applicant had to go for a temporary rezoning application because commercial uses on lands designated as urban residential are very limited, and this application did not meet that criteria. So by going for the temporary rezoning, hopefully that aligns with the official plan review. And in the future, when those two align, hopefully they would not need to go for an additional application.
Okay, thank you.
That was a great answer. Good question, Councillor Gatward. Seeing none, as I said, Councillor Bell, what do you want to do with this?
Yeah, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Howes that application ZBA 21/20/AW from Dean de Saint Croix for property located at 32 to 34 Dundas Street West be approved as outlined in staff report RPT-20-127.
Thank you. No other questions? Clear on what we're voting on. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Good luck and thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
6D. 61 Cedar Street. Matt?
Thank you. Again, no presentation. The staff report's included in council agenda, and staff are available for questions if there are any.
Okay, again, this is a public meeting, so we'll declare it open. Are there any questions to staff about the application? Seeing none, is there any member of the public here to speak for or against the application?
The applicant is here this evening online.
All right, do you want to speak to us or you're just here for questions?
Just here for questions. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. There's no questions to the application? Seeing none, we'll call the meeting closed. Councillor Coleman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Miller, that the application ZBA 26/20 AW from AMHBC Planning be approved.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments or concerns, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 6E. What do we got? Matt?
Thank you very much. Our planner, Brandon, is here to present on additional residential units. Thank you, Brandon.
Hello, Brandon.
All right, good evening, everyone. So I'm just going to do a brief presentation about the ARU project so far, and then that way, hopefully, we can get to some questions if council or any members of the public have that. So just generally speaking, this project, the goal of that was to broaden kind of our permissions for additional residential units. We were hoping that we could bring our policies into line with the provincial policies that have been updated through Bill 108. As well, we've noted a very key desire from county residents for some more flexible housing options. And so that's part of why this application is before you, and we've seen it kind of come forward to council a few times in the last couple months. So like I said, two key reasons, the provincial reasons, and then again, the desires of the county residents that became very clear during our engagement processes. So with that speaking, we're making some changes to our official plan and some changes to our zoning bylaw. We've outlined those in the number of attachments in the quite lengthy report for you guys. So hopefully if you've sifted through that, if you have any questions, let us know. But generally speaking, the intent of our official plan changes for this particular project are to encourage efficient and cost-effective development for people. So if they want to add an extra house or an extra unit to their property, it's a cost-effective way of allowing them to do that without the need for, say, an official plan amendment or zoning bylaw amendment. We'll be allowing more of these uses by right for people with the regulations in place to make sure that it's done properly. And then that would lead to the zoning and the implementation. So the changes that we're making with our zoning bylaw will ensure safe water, safe servicing for people. We'll be looking after our parking requirements, the size and setbacks, and we'll be working in tandem with obviously the building code and the Ontario Fire Code requirements that would come into play for establishing a legal dwelling unit on the properties. We also are going to be providing kind of helpful information to the public, as this is something that we've seen a lot of interest in. And I do have a draft version here that you can quickly look at on the screen, but we'll be providing folks with kind of a planning your ARU kind of work plan. So it has some popular questions, frequently asked questions. It'll have the exact kind of setbacks that would apply if the policy goes forward. And then it would as well have just a worksheet that will be shown to kind of guide people through the process. And I apologize that this didn't quite make it into the agenda as we were working pretty quickly with our communications folks to get it done. But I can definitely circulate this as well to council if that's their desire. And then through you, Mr. Mayor, I will open it up to questions during the public meeting here. And like I said, if anyone has any questions for me, feel free to ask.
I hope I did declare it an open public meeting. Not sure that I did, but I'm doing it now. Councillor Ferrier first, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Brandon. Great work here on the report. Also, it was nice to see there were a lot of questions from residents who were curious about this, but also to see replies from residents after those questions had been answered saying, oh, great. And it's great to see that continuity from the concern, even some, the sky is falling, to, oh, okay, this isn't what I've heard about in other communities where, generally speaking, if you're hearing about it from another community, you're often hearing the negative stories of these things. So well thought out, well planned. It looks like we've learned a lot from other areas and what they've done well and poorly. The numbers are going to increase of who can do this if this goes through. But I guess my question is, what were the sort of top concerns of residents? And could you maybe explain how we've addressed them in the policies for those watching? Because I know a couple hundred people are going to watch this eventually.
Absolutely. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Ferrier. So generally speaking, the concerns that were coming in were with regards to private services. So services or properties that are on well and septic, ensuring that folks have safe access to their drinking water and safe septic attenuation. So there will be requirements in the policies that address that directly. For example, the 0.4 hectare requirement, which is through the Ministry of the Environment, information through them, as well as through kind of general guidelines that the province has for septic attenuation on property sizes. So that's where we've drawn our kind of line in the sand, the safe line in the sand, to say, if you have a property that's above this size, yes, that makes sense. It's going to be safely, or it could be safely possible for you to do that. Whereas the ones that would be below that, we would want to consider those more on a case-by-case basis. So that's an example of one of those kind of particular numbers that's in the policies that is addressing that. Another one was parking. We often hear about on-street parking issues, and that can come into play when you're intensifying urban areas. We will require an additional parking space for the additional unit. We did have some comments about adding 2 or 3 to be able to do that. The parking requirements are provincially mandated, so they are put directly into the Planning Act. So that addressing that might be more of a holistic review of the zoning bylaw in the future. But for now, we do have the requirement that 1 parking space needs to be provided in order for them to be able to establish this unit. And there are parking size requirements for the space. So if that space size doesn't fit on the property, or if they only can offer 1 parking space instead of the 2 that their property requires, that will all kind of be caught during that assessment as we're moving through the building permit process. I won't get too much further in depth with the policies, but like I say, if anyone has any specific questions, I'm happy to help out that way.
Another question? Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 3 to Brandon. Brandon, I thought it was well balanced. I know you want to increase housing, but you don't want to annoy all the people around you when you do it. So it was a nice balance. My question is regarding input from the province. It was interesting. I seen somebody write in from OMAFRA regarding MDS. I was wondering, did the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, did they look this over? Did they have input on that? What was their role in all this, other than creating the broad guidelines such as Bill 108?
Yeah, so their role in this, through you, Mr. Mayor, the councilor's question here. Their role in this is more that broadened permissions through Bill 108. They weren't circulated directly on this application or these kind of changes because they lay out that provincial framework for us to kind of fill in the blanks. But generally speaking, I would assume that their comments would be similar to the ones that are received from neighboring municipalities, whereas we've tried to make this kind of a County of Brant specific way of changing the policies. But they're obviously through their provincial policy statement, through the Planning Act, through the growth plan for the greater Golden Horseshoe, they've kind of given us that guidance already to put these tools in place.
Okay, thank you, Brent.
Any other questions? Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Brandon. Brandon, I see there was a great interest from rural residential properties and properties that have lots of space in rural areas. Now, you've said 0.4 hectares and over, a second ARU would be allowed. Would they have to install a separate septic bed? Or if there's attenuation capacity, can they use the existing septic bed? Or does that depend on the number of people and bedrooms?
Yeah, through Mayor Bailey to Councillor Gatward, that is exactly correct. It will depend on the occupancy or the number of bedrooms in that. It's regulated a bit through the building code. And then that way, the intent of the policy is to kind of discourage the severances that we don't want to happen in our agricultural and rural areas. So we will be encouraging people to hook into their existing septic or update it that way, whatever they can kind of safely do. And that way we avoid the kind of circumvention of policy and people coming in and saying, oh, okay, well, we were allowed to install this additional septic bed, so we were already set up for a severance. So we're trying to avoid things like that, and that's why we have that 0.4 size requirement that you noted, and as well the separation distance of 40 meters. So we'll be reviewing them, or the placement of the ARUs and ensuring that they're within 40 meters of the existing dwelling.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? I think the work you've done here, Brandon, is great. And I think you're going to make a lot of people in the county very happy. There's all kinds of people that want funny little things, and this sort of clears up a lot of problems. So I think, thank you for your work. Thank you for your report. Seeing none, we're going to call this meeting closed if there's no other questions. Councillor Chambers isn't here, so I'd like to have someone move this through for me, please. Councillor Laferriere, please.
I'll do it, David.
Okay, Councillor Wheat's going to do it, seconded by Councillor Gatward.
I'll move the recommendation as presented by Brandon.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor to receive? Again, thank you for the good work, Brandon. F, 260 Pottruff Road. Matt.
Thanks very much. Our planner, Ryan, will be presenting this one tonight, so I'll pass it over to him. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you. Hello, Ryan.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. The subject lands are located on the east side of Rest Acres Road, north of Highway 403 in Paris. The subject lands are approximately 12.44 hectares or 30.73 acres in size and are currently vacant with pre-servicing and grading activities underway for this larger subdivision. The subject lands are situated within the primary urban settlement area of Paris and are designated as employment in the county's official plan. The applicant is proposing to amend the current zoning on a portion of the subject lands from Prestige Industrial M1 and Special Exception Light Industrial M2 to Special Exception Light Industrial M2-32 to allow for the development of a regional warehousing facility with site-specific provisions related to urban design, as well as to permit reduced parking ratio from 1 space per 100 square meters to 0.45 spaces per 100 square meters. Staff is of the opinion that the zoning bylaw amendment has merit, as it is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the general intent of the growth plan and the County Brand official plan. Staff is therefore recommending that this application be approved. This concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Brandon? I'm sorry. Just a minute here. I have to declare this a public meeting first and it's open. Are there any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Mayor, the applicant is here if anybody wants to speak to him or if he has anything to say.
Yeah. Councillor Gatward, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My only question was a very small one in the scale of things. We had a review of this project previously, and I think everyone was quite pleased to hear about it and the jobs that it will bring to the county. My only question is there any chance to put more trees or landscaping around these huge buildings? I don't know who wants to answer that.
The applicant's here.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it's Chris Pigeon. I'm with GSP Group representing Vicano. So thank you for that question. So we are in a site plan application process, and I would anticipate there will be additional landscaping. It was a question that was raised during the public meeting before the county previously, and those plans are being developed. So there certainly will be more landscaping than you see right now. As a second update for council, you may recall Vicano had indicated that this site is in competition with two other sites, one in Guelph, one in Hamilton, for Eaton, E-A-T-O-N, to locate a significant distribution center here. And I'm pleased to indicate that Vicano has identified that one of the three sites, so the Guelph site, has been removed by the proposed tenant. So we are down to two. It's between Hamilton and Brantford. And of course, we would hope that it ultimately is located here in Brantford.
Thank you very much for that answer. I just thought trees are so important to our environment and climate change. And they look like lovely buildings, and the trees would only further enhance them. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? And I'm sure that you meant the county of Brant, not Brantford.
Oh, yes, of course I did. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Of course you did. I knew you did.
It's a township of Brantford.
Is there any other questions? Seeing none, I will declare the public meeting closed and turn it over to Councillor Laferriere, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Pierce that application ZBA 19-20-RC from Kingwood, Paris Meadows, and Vicano Developments for property located at 260 Pot Roof Road be approved as outlined in staff report RPT-20-146.
Thank you. We're clear on what we're voting on. All those in favor? Opposed? And carried. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, County Council.
Okay, we're going on to 4G, please. 230 Oakland Road.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our planner, Ryan, will also be speaking to this one. Take it away, Ryan.
Thank you, Matt and Mr. Mayor. Thanks again. The subject lands are located on the north side of Oakland Road, east of Highway 24 in the former township of Oakland. The subject lands are approximately 0.45 hectares or 1.11 acres in size, with a frontage of approximately 56 meters on Oakland Road. Subject lands currently contain a vacant building, which is being renovated for the purposes of a convenience store. The subject lands are designated as general commercial and natural heritage systems within the county's official plan. The applicant is proposing to amend the zoning bylaw on a portion of the subject lands from natural heritage NH to temporary zone T96 to permit the use of a mobile refreshment cart for a maximum period of 3 years. Staff is of the opinion that the proposed zoning amendment has merit, as it is consistent with provincial policy statement and conforms to the general intent of the growth plan in the County of Brant's official plan. Staff is therefore recommending that this application be approved. this concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Okay, I will declare this public meeting open. Is there someone representing the application here, Heather?
Yes, Mayor Bailey, there is members representing the applicant, but there's also members of the public to speak to it following that.
All right, let's go with the applicants first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Rob Van Porten, Cahoon Engineering Limited. I believe Mr. Phillips is still online, as well as the applicant owner of the property. As pointed out by the planner, the application seeks the temporary permission to establish a refreshment cart on a property that is on Oakland Road, near Highway 24, I guess it is in that location. The period would be for a maximum of 3 years. As I mentioned, it is for a mobile refreshment cart, which is a use generally permitted in the zoning category. However, in the past, there has been a specific zoning category established for the property, and a mobile refreshment cart is not one of the permitted uses. As pointed out by the planner, the refreshment cart would be an accessory use or used by patrons of a proposed convenience store, which is presently being renovated on the property. The refreshment cart would also be used by patrons of the Willow Lake Campground and trailer park, which is immediately adjacent and behind the property. The application is made for the temporary use of the property as permitted by the Official Plan and Planning Act for the 3-year period permitted by both of those planning documents. We have read the letter from the neighboring property owner, and that letter was attached to the agenda package, and it appears to me that a majority of the items listed are items that would generally be reviewed by the county staff, whether it be building permit or use permits. But I do note that the person that has a concern is also ready to make a presentation, as is another property owner. I have to point out that this application is solely for the purposes of establishing the mobile refreshment cart and does not impact any other permission for the property. So the purpose is only for the refreshment cart. Mr. Chair, I can respond to questions, or as I said, Mr. Phillips is around as is the owner, and any of us can respond to questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the application, please? Councillor Miller first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Rob, am I reading this correctly? We're looking, or even to Ryan, are we looking for a 3-year temporary in order for the convenience store to be renovated? Am I reading that correctly?
The application, Councillor, is only to allow the operation of the mobile food cart. It has no impact, nor are we seeking any zoning permission for the convenience store. As I understand it, is a use that is already permitted in the zone.
Okay, then why are we going for 3 years? Why don't we go for 1 year? And I guess either you, Rob, or Ryan, if anybody has an answer to that.
I can speak to that, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Ryan.
Thank you. County staff are aware of some of the concerns raised by residents related to the development of this site, not necessarily directly related to the mobile refreshment cart. There is a proposed cannabis retail store going in on this site, and we're understanding and realize that there's some concern with the general development and what's happening with the site. So we thought it would be best to do this on a trial basis and have some sort of control on this as best we can for an interim period, as we like to do with applications that aren't generally permitted, especially where we've heard these types of concerns from residents, and some of them are valid. And I think that a 3-year trial period would be best. And I outlined that in my report. There's it gives us an opportunity as a county to really step back, take this in, what's happening over a period of a few years, and then reassess after the fact as to whether or not it's something we want to see happening in the long term.
Okay, I thank you for the answer, and I will be looking forward to an amendment when this comes up for a vote. Thank you.
Councillor Gatward, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Van Porten, you said that the food cart could service the campground in behind. Were you aware that the campground has its own concession area where they sell hamburgers, hot dogs, the same sort of fast foods that might be served at the food cart?
Yes, of course, I'm aware of that, but not necessarily. But the mobile cart will be established and would generally be anybody of the public can use it because it's at the entrance of the Willow Lake campground. I would expect that certainly patrons or campers of the campground would avail itself of that facility as well.
Actually, it's, if I might, Mr. Mayor, the entrance is a private road and it's not owned by the campground. But I guess I'm wondering too, if the definition of a cart, when I think of a cart, I think of one like they have at some of the retail stores where they sell sausages and cold drinks. And when I went out to view this, I was surprised to see that it's more than a cart, in my opinion. I don't know where that definition came from. And it also has a structure built on the side. Were you aware of this structure?
I was on the site just after lunch today, and certainly I'm aware of what the facility is. I noted that it has been established. I don't believe it is in operation because I didn't see any menus or signage on the building. And yes, I was aware that the road to the campground is on private property, and in fact, I presume one of the concerned neighbors, who I believe owns the driveway, can respond to that. What the definition, we're following the definitions as contained in your zoning bylaw, and staff is satisfied that the facility as proposed or as established meets the criteria and definition of the zoning bylaw. I am well aware that the zoning bylaw does not have a square footage or square meterage in its definition for such a facility, which is not unusual.
Mr. Mayor, might I comment on that as well?
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to Rob's comments regarding the addition, and I apologize, I should have included this information in my report, but the county's bylaw enforcement group and the building officials were out at the site, I believe in August, and had some correspondence with the owner and applicant, putting them on notice that they would require a building permit for the addition. We have not undergone a review of that because we like to establish whether or not we're going to even permit the cart in the first place, and then we can go from there. But again, it is noted, and staff as well as the applicant are aware that that's something that will have to be addressed, but it's unfortunately a bit of a moot point until we establish whether it's a permitted use.
Well, thank you for that, Ryan. I appreciate that. And my last questions, Mr. Mayor, through you to Mr. Van Porten. This property where the cart is proposed, I'm wondering, it's a gravel parking lot. How will the dust be controlled? How will the garbage bins be placed? And will they be animal proof? Because there are a lot of animals in the area. What will the hours of operation be? And would it be possible to plant cedar trees or evergreens along the west side of the property to screen 228 Oakland Road. I guess I didn't see any of that on the site plan that your company provided.
Perhaps,
And
Mr.
also,
Mayor.
sorry, one more thing. The lighting. There's been new lighting added, which is polluting the neighborhood with light. And bylaw enforcement, I believe, have had complaints about the lighting. So I'm wondering how that's going to be addressed as well. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, perhaps that is those are questions best addressed by the operator, who I believe is also available through Zoom.
Can you address those questions for us, please?
Sorry, I think it's Ms. Graham that that indicated that she would be entering in this debate.
She's here. Hi, Sherry.
Hi.
Can you address some of those concerns for Councillor Gatward, please?
Yeah, so we do have gravel that we put in the parking lot there, and I don't think it's going to create dust. I mean, if anything, it may help keep it down. If there is dust being created, we certainly will address that. Garbage, we fence the entire perimeter of the property with a commercial black chain link fence that looks quite sharp. It should prevent any garbage if it were to be blowing around from blowing anywhere but on our property. We certainly will have adequate garbage containers there. We take great pride in a beautiful looking property, and we certainly are not going to allow people to litter the property and make it look trashy. As far as animals go, again, that was part of our reasons too, because I mean, there's a campground nearby. There's lots of trees around, so certainly animals are going to be present in the area, and food definitely will attract them. So we will definitely make sure the garbage is emptied and secured away from any, availability, so that critters can get into it and be attracted there. There's a storage space. And there, we have options of getting dumpsters and things like that to keep the animals out, which we would probably do as well. But there's also a back storage area on the back of the building that we can use to secure garbage away from, any animals or whatever. As far as planting trees and whatnot, that's not something we've considered at this point. It would take years for that to probably grow to prevent or provide a screen for the neighbor. The lighting, as far as that goes, we have been contacted by 3 different neighbors on 4 different occasions. We have adjusted the light, contrary to what the letter states. We've spoke to them and addressed those things. Yes, the lights are bright. It's LEDs. They're there for security purposes. If people have issues with that, we're certainly willing to listen. But on the same token, I feel that, I don't know, I don't live there, so I don't, see inside the house how bright it is. But, we certainly were interested in having the property well lit. At one point, we were considering putting some other options at the back end of that property, which required perhaps some outdoor storage, which we've since changed our minds on. And that was sort of one of the rationales for having that well lit. So I think that's probably all the points that Ms. Gatward had.
The operating hours.
Oh, operating hours, again, I mean, we just applied for the food truck. I mean, at this point, we were kind of thinking it would probably be 11 a.m. to 6 p.m., 7 p.m. at the latest. And it would be primarily, spring to fall. It wouldn't be operating all year round. It would just be the summer, spring, early fall and summer months. And I mean, there's, it's not intended to, I heard someone make a comment about the Willow Lake Park. It's not intended to draw and, take away their customers from their canteen that they have on site. I mean, it's just to provide options for the community. Lots of different options. I mean, there's a walking trail nearby. We've, anytime we're there on the property, since the food truck has been sitting there, there's been, there's always people, when are you opening? There seems to be some excitement about it. So that would be, and the hours, like, I guess, like I said, it's, we'd be looking at.
Thank you. I think you answered all the questions. Thank you, Councillor. We're going to let Councillor Pierce speak now, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just so I'm clear here, this application is to permit the mobile refreshment stand for a permitted of maximum 3 years. What I don't understand is, from what we've been told and what we're hearing here tonight, this has already been built. So I don't think I like that. And if I could use the analogy, and I suppose the pun is intended, we've definitely put the cart before the horse here. And I don't understand why. If you've applied for this, that's all fine and dandy. That's what you're supposed to do. So why would you go ahead and put it there with the possibility that we as a council may say no?
Who wants to speak? Sherry, do you want to reply to that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So back in the spring, before we even purchased the food truck, we had spoke to the county, and the person that we spoke to is no longer with the county, unfortunately. So there is some email correspondence that we still have that suggested that it was a very simple process, that it would just be a matter of the zoning change, bylaw temporary change for 3 years, and it sounded like it was a very simple process. And from there, that's why we went and bought it, because we assumed, especially during the COVID season, it seemed like a really good business opportunity for us. So we just decided that it would be a way to generate some revenue while we try to get the other opportunities that we were looking to do from the store portion. Generate some revenue on the property. So that's kind of why we bought it and started down the road. And then since then there was, many roadblocks that have come up. Yeah, that's kind of why it's there. And prior to the permit being in place.
Councillor Pierce?
Yeah, just a follow up to that. I'm sorry, you said this was springtime you had these conversations?
Yeah, I'm going to say March, April.
Okay, so, and that's fine. So why are we now October when you're coming forward with this permit if it was said to you that it's such a simple thing?
Well, because there's been a lot of, like I said, there's been a lot of roadblocks along the way. We ended up having to have a complete site plan, engineered drawings, which is why the Cahoon company and gentlemen are here tonight, because they ended up doing a bunch of drawings and stuff for the building and whatnot. So that all we had to do the site plan, all of those things needed to be done. So that took us probably well into July, I believe. Mr. Phillips was the one that helped us with that, so he might be able to give us some date timeframes on that one. So, and it just finally got on the agenda today, or for today.
Okay, thank you.
I can, if I might, Mr. Mayor, I can perhaps answer one of those questions. The application for the temporary use was made in July. So, it was made, unfortunately through COVID, it's, things are moving a little slower than everybody's trying to do their best. But the application was made in July, so.
Councillor Ferrier, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Van Porten. You had said in your presentation the structure that is proposed or established. I'm wondering which one is it? Is it proposed or established?
The food cart is there.
That's established. I'm also wondering if the GRCA has said anything about this space. I know that's it says here it's a regulated floodplain, and I haven't seen anything from the GRCA. Has there been contact with them?
The GRCA in the report indicated they had no concerns. Maybe sorry, Ryan, I interjected there. And he Ryan may expand on that.
Yeah, Mr. If I may, we did receive confirmation from Ashley Graham at the GRCA that they had no concerns or objections to the proposal, and they would not be issuing a permit based on the fact that the mobile refreshment cart is mobile and does not require a permit under their regulations. Now, I've seen some correspondence to as of today, I believe it is, that the GRCA has been out and did note the addition that was put on, and they may have some concerns with regards to that. My best comment would be at this time that the GRCA will issue permits, or will require permits to be submitted if it falls under the definition of a structure for their regulations. And we could certainly, we certainly would not issue a building permit for the structure addition without clearance from the GRCA.
Isaac, did you want to speak to that? Do you have anything to say? No? Isaac, no? Bob, did you want to add anything? Isaac?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry if I don't have the proper wording and introductions and everything. This is actually the first time I'm ever part of a council meeting or anything like that. So I had some correspondence with Ashley Graham from the GRCA last week and received an email from her on Friday, October 2nd, saying that the GRCA did not offer any comments on the zoning bylaw amendment. So when reading the report, saying on page 5, where it says the GRCA they've received support from the GRCA, kind of raises concerns to me when I have an email as of Friday, October 2nd at 8:37 a.m. The GRCA did not offer comments. And then I have an email today and a phone call with Ashley Graham regarding the permanent structure that is, or semi-permanent structure that is there now attached to the mobile food cart, that they would require GRCA permits, and they have some concerns regarding the food cart that is there now.
Thank you.
And then in addition to that, Ashley Graham recommended that I reach out to the Ministry of Environment because there's certain environmental applications here that the GRCA doesn't comment on, specifically pertaining to protected species of plants, because the Ministry of Natural Resources has deemed the wetlands on my property and on adjacent properties a significant wetland. And we actually get conservation land tax exemptions on our properties because of the significance of the wetlands. And so I've been in contact with them now as well, and will be contacting the Ministry of Environment regarding provincially and federally protected plants and trees under the Endangered Species Act from 2007, including the American chestnut and butternut trees, in addition to a number of other plants within the wetland there.
Thank you for that. I might have jumped forward too fast there. Are there any more questions to the applicant? Councillor House first, then Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is through you to staff, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you. Brian.
So it sounds, just from Ryan's comment a couple minutes ago, it sounds like there's some new information that could pertain to this application. I'm wondering if we should be considering deferring this decision until we have all of the information from the GRCA and the Ministry of the Environment. I'm not completely clear on the process here, but it just sounds like there's very new information that should probably be considered before we put this to a vote.
Thank you, Councillor House. Councillor Gatward, did you have anything to add? Councillor Gatward.
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I had one more question for the applicant or their agent about the actual parking lot. I realize that half of the parking lot is in the commercial area for the store, and the other half of the parking lot is in the heritage area. And I'm wondering about the fill that was dumped on the parking lot. At one point, I thought I saw, when I was down there, what looked like recycled asphalt. And I'm wondering if Ms. Graham can confirm that. And then they have also brought in nice clean gravel and placed that on top. I saw a load of gravel there just yesterday that wasn't spread yet. So there's been a lot of fill on that natural heritage site. And the parking lot, when you look at the overhead internet shots of the property, show a grassland between the parking lot and the Willow Lake Road ditch. But that's gone now, so the parking lot was expanded. And I wonder if we know how much fill was placed on the parking lot in the natural heritage area. Can anyone answer that?
Sherry, do you want to try that?
Sure. So as far as grassland goes, we did not cover or take away any grassland. In fact, we've put some topsoil and planted more grass seed. I know that we've had, several contractors and people working in there trying to make the property look more presentable, grade the parking lots and whatnot. So there is some fresh gravel in there. I'm not 100% sure about the asphalt that you're talking about. But we have brought in some clean topsoil and planted some seed and brought in some fresh gravel and graded that around, but I'm not sure about the asphalt that you're referencing. I can, that I don't know what to say about that.
Oh, you've tried to answer the question for Councillor Gatwood. Michael, do you have something to say?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. As you can see behind me is an actual picture of the site right now. To my left shoulder, you'll see the asphalt that they're talking about. And behind me is the stone that has been laid there. Probably 2, maybe 3 truckloads have come in. I'd have to double check the cameras, but yeah, it's definitely the grade has changed there.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Councillor Gatwood, those answer your questions. Are there any other questions to the presenter? We have members of the public here to speak too. So I think, are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming to present. Isaac, you have a question to the presenter?
It's more of a question, I guess, for county staff or for the councilors, just because I'm not aware of the entire process. But my concerns with the 3-year temporary permit is that what is there in place that after the 3 years that they need to remove it if it doesn't work, or that it gets forgotten about and now it's just still there after the 3 years and they don't have to apply for a permit. And then my other concern would be that after the 3 years, because it's been there for 3 years, they obtain a permanent permit and then it will be there permanently and there is no temporary aspect to that. I just have some concerns that the 3 years is a long time for a temporary permit.
Ryan, can you speak to that, please?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, of course. So the county maintains a database of temporary bylaws that we've passed. We have them for things like this instance, as well as with garden suites and other temporary applications. We maintain that, and we do put owners on notice when their their temporary bylaw is coming up for renewal. And at that point, they're offered an opportunity to either extend their temporary zoning, or if it's deemed appropriate by staff, to bring forward a more permanent application. And that's kind of the intent, again, right, is to sort of feel out whether or not it's a type of use that we think is appropriate for a site, and whether it's creating any major conflicts that we've noted over this 3 years. And, I think it's similar to what we've done with things like dog kennels and other type of contentious type uses that we want to try out, if you will.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, if there's no other questions to the presenter, I'd like to thank them for coming tonight. Heather, you said there's members of the public that want to speak to or against the application here.
Yeah, the first was Isaac Allen, and I'm not sure if he has further information he'd like to present.
Yeah, I kind of thought that I jumped the gun there. Do you want to keep speaking? Do you have more that you want to say, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just kind of wanted to kind of go through the council report that you all received. I know we had talked about some of the the issues in here, but I've gone through and highlighted just a few things that I wanted to reiterate. The first one, that it says under the strategic priority is to engage citizens in a dialogue that is transparent, multifaceted, and mutually respectful. I feel as though this process has not been transparent and that no information was provided to residents until I had gone out myself and found out information about the changes happening to the adjacent property and notified other adjacent properties. It was then that the new property owners reached out to myself and we had a meeting regarding the pending cannabis retail, which is fine. But then since then, there has been more transparency, but I just feel as though this process has not been transparent with the neighboring properties. And then also just being mutually respectful, we've made multiple complaints regarding the lighting, as mentioned earlier. There's been minor adjustments to the lighting, but I've spoken with Ryan about it, about the upgrading of lighting and the difference between the installation of new lighting. And there has been the installation of a number of new lighting on the property, and it's already an issue, and not even all those lights are on yet. And also my concern is if they're not opening until the spring, why are the lights on now? That doesn't really seem all that understanding or all that respectful of neighboring properties if there's nothing going on. I'd also like to make a note that I did request a site visit from my property with Ryan. I know it's you can't go on somebody else's property and meet with somebody from planning, that's fine. But due to COVID and some other concerns, that has not happened. I have gotten to meet with a number of other people on the property there, but from my own property, but just, I did want to voice that concern. And then on the second...
Isaac, before we go any further, I should have asked you to state your name and your address.
Oh, sorry.
Could you do that now for me, please?
Yeah, so my name is Isaac Allen. I live and own the property 228 Oakland Road in Scotland. The property directly adjacent to the proposed rezoning property.
Thank you. Continue.
Under the proposal, it says existing convenience store. I just feel like the wording in the report there is leading, and it kind of gives you it kind of implies that there is already an operating convenience store. However, there is not. I just wanted to make that clear. There is no other convenience store. There's no store operating there currently. As mentioned earlier, there is renovations going on, but I just feel like the wording is a little leading. And then also I wanted to make sure that it was clear that they provided specifically saying that shopping opportunities for patients to the adjacent campground and trailer park. However, they do have a convenience store and food truck and facility already located there. I know that members of the public will also be interested in the food truck that may not be able to access on the campground. But again, I feel it pretty leading to make a specific point of saying it's servicing the campground when they already have one. And then under the interdepartmental considerations, as mentioned earlier, here it says that Grand River Conservation Authority has no objections. But at my initial reading of the report and my emails, as mentioned with Ashley Graham, that there was no objections, there was no comments. And I do think that there is a distinct difference. And there was a site visit pending. Now that site visit has since then been conducted, and with my conversation with Ashley Graham, there are new concerns regarding the proposed food truck. But I just wanted to make note of that. And then also with the environmental planner having no objections, my concerns are that whether or not the Ministry of Environment was contacted regarding trees protected under the Endangered Species Act from 2007. And then also where it says the following departments and agencies did not provide comments, it says forestry did not provide comments. And again, I just want to reiterate the fact that there are provincially and federally significant species within the wetland there, including some trees. And then on the page number 5, it says conformity with provincial municipal policies. Again, as mentioned, the food truck is currently there. It's not proposed. It is on the site already. And I don't feel that that conforms with provincial or municipal policies and bylaws. And then mentioned earlier was the garbage and litter. I do have significant concern regarding animals, litter, and garbage on my property. And then I believe that is it. But I did want to make just a side note to make all councillors aware that we've done work on our property. We did a substantial addition on our house, which required a county building permit, which cost around $4,500. It also required a GRCA permit, which cost an additional $2,000. And we were required to do an environmental impact study, which cost almost $20,000. And we went through all the proper avenues. We went through all the proper policies. We went through all the proper bylaws. We notified everybody. I'm sure you guys had a meeting very similar to this regarding our building permit and the concerns from GRCA. And it's just frustrating from my standpoint that it appears as though that is not across the board, that everybody is going through the same avenues or has to go through the same things, even though our properties have the same protected wetland, they're in the same floodplain, they're in the same geographic area, and are under the same GRCA regulations.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions? Seeing no. Sherry?
Am I allowed to respond at this point, or is it not time to do that?
No, you can respond to him.
Okay, so basically, I'm trying to jot down some of these things as he's talking. So, building an addition, I believe, is a little different than placing a food truck on the property. And as far as garbage on your property and animals on your property, I don't believe that's coming directly from our property at this stage of the game, and I don't anticipate that will ever be a problem. Transparency as far as the original property, there was no intention to try to hide anything that we were doing. I think the original, this all came to be, Mr. Allen's caught wind of sort of from, I don't even know who or where, because we'd never met the man before, what we were up to over there, and put out a letter within the community explaining to everybody, all the neighbors, that we were, putting in a cannabis store, we were going to be selling liquor in a convenience store, that it was going to bring crime and criminals to the area, that was going to be dangerous and all kinds of different things. At that point, I definitely, got in touch with him and did offer to have a community meeting to, explain to people and let them see who we are. I've lived in this neighborhood for 55 years, and and I said to all of them that I would never ever, do something to bring, crime and all this sort of thing to the area. But the transparency piece, I do work in the cannabis industry, and I managed 10 retail cannabis stores. Prior to that, it was medical cannabis. And I didn't really anticipate or realize the significant impact that it would have on the neighbors. I just didn't really expect that it would be that way. So, a bad assumption on my part, plus, COVID and all that kind of stuff sort of impacted some of those things too. So, but our intention is to put together there a reputable, professional, beautiful looking property that's going to enhance our community, not take away from it or degrade it, or, decrease the value of people's homes or those kinds of things. As far as the lighting, we felt that we had addressed people's concerns. Prior to it being reported to the county, we had on 3 different occasions adjusted lighting. So again, if it continues to be a problem, that's not been brought to our attention. Mr. Allen's wife has been given my cell phone number back in the spring. So if there's ever any issues, they're welcome to contact us. There has been nobody reaching out to me about any of that. Site visit, I don't know what to say about that one, but as far as putting the food truck there, the intention was not to, again, put the cart before the horse, or however we wanted to say that. Putting that structure on there was to protect people from the elements if they were coming to enjoy food at the truck. It is a mobile truck. That structure is not attached to the truck. If it needs to be moved to satisfy anybody's regulations or requirements, that certainly can happen. We did not build that intentionally. We didn't realize a permit was needed because we didn't consider it to be a structure. But once we were told it was, we certainly did go forward and get the permit in place. Excuse me. As far as the endangered species of trees and stuff like that, I don't know how having a food truck set on that lot is going to endanger or hurt these species. We have no intentions of chopping down trees or, excuse me, damaging trees. You know, just a month and a half ago, Mr. Allens was over at the property with his children saying they were excited about the food truck. So it's shocking to me that he's now opposed to having the food truck there. So, you know, it just seems there, you know, there's Scotland Agrimart is right next door to us. There's a chemical mixing plant. So again, I mean, to me, a food truck in the minor is a very minor thing in the grand scheme of things in that area. So again, I don't, we're not, you know, looking at having a food truck to be as serious of a thing, I guess. And, you know, I apologize if we're being ignorant in that regard, but that certainly is not our intentions. Our intention is to bring work to the community, enhance the community. It's not to create problems and, you know, excuse me, I've got an itch in my throat, so I'm just going to mute here.
Thank you very much. I think you've spoken to the applicant's concerns or the citizens' concerns. Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask how Michael fits into this situation here and into the whole, we've heard a couple things from him, but I'm just wondering like where he sits in this.
Michael, do you want to explain how you're connected to this?
I would love to. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors, and attendees. I live across the street. 225 Oakland Road. So what you see in behind me is an actual picture taken today from my driveway. And I did zoom in a little bit on the food truck. So I do have a couple of things that I would like to ask. One is a refreshment truck or a refreshment mobile refreshment vehicle with a fence that is secured around it and with a ordering area and with a kitchen that is obviously in that truck with the, not sure if you can see the stack in behind me. It's going to serve more than refreshments. So is that the proper designation for something of this nature? Where obviously they're going to be serving food out of it as well. The second part of it is, as the MOE is concerned, would be the grease that comes out of there, as well as any food issues as part of the commercial food and beverage. That kind of becomes a concern as well. But I'd like to go into, I do have a prepared statement. I was told that, and I'm not sure if this is my 10 minutes or not. I will not take that much time, I promise. I'm here today to ask for some clarity. When I was first approached by my neighbors and friends, I was, like most of you, sitting at home due to COVID-19. I was fortunate enough to be working from home and 8 hours a day. I and my cameras had a front row seat to what was happening across the street. We came home, I think it was March 16th. It wasn't soon long after that that the hubbub started. It quickly became a topic of the neighborhood as to the changes that had been occurring there. I lost count the number of dumpsters that came out of there. And in fact, if you saw my previous photo, there is actually one still sitting there. The machinery that would come and go, as well as the number of trades that were in and out of there all the time, and still to this day on certain occasions. It became quite the busy spot. Even the families from the trailer park and the families walking and riding along the trail seemed to notice. And they have taken notice of the food truck. I have seen them over there as well. The trail, now this is an aside, but the trail has never been used so much in a summer as it has this year. And I thank COVID for that, but I digress. One day, one of my neighbors, Isaac, and his wife and their kids knocked at my door. They informed my wife and I that there was a pot shop going in across the street. I was floored. I didn't understand why. Now I understand that I'm supposed to keep my comments to this food truck, but it relates itself both in what the presenter had said, as well as to the food truck. Because I'm not sure if you've ever partaken any time in the green stuff, but it kind of makes you hungry. And if the food truck's right there, that's a 2-for-1.
Michael, you need to stay focused on the food truck.
I'm doing my best.
You know, you can't bring your munchies to the council table.
Okay, I promise. I digress. I do apologize.
Thank you.
So my concern is that so far, what we have seen in both the meeting that occurred and as of today is a plea of ignorance. That unfortunately, what I see here is the old adage of begging for forgiveness before permission is requested. And I'm not sure, like I said, that food truck's there. It's been there for almost 60 days. The service is there, the plumbing, the electrical, everything is there. The lights are on. They even had it running just to test it, but it stunk. It's not something we really want. So, you know, it's just, while they have done a fantastic job on the building in getting it ready, getting it up, you know what? What is the end goal? And that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Are there any questions for Michael? He's a concerned neighbor right across the road.
Actually, there shouldn't be, point of order, sir. There should not be questions to a presenter.
He's a member of the public who has vested interest.
I understand that, but you don't question his presentation. Questions to the planner, questions to the applicant, not to a presenter.
All right. Is that true, Heather?
No, council's allowed to ask questions of clarification of any presenter.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any questions for Michael, please? Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I've never had the pleasure of meeting Michael, but I did this evening via virtual meeting. My question, Michael, is, so are you afraid that the customers at the convenience store will be over at the food truck causing issues?
My concern is not with a convenience store, because there's no convenience store there.
Well, it's a cannabis convenience store.
It's a pot shop.
Yeah.
Right? Let's call it what it is.
Well, staff are calling it a cannabis retail outlet.
Yes.
Cannabis retail
And
convenience.
that, no problem. I insure LPs as part of what I do. Okay. I insure municipalities. I insure multinational risk. So this, like I said, it is what it is. But to me, this is a 1-2 punch. Okay. It's to keep people on the property to buy more. That's the goal. Who are the customers? A customer base is not from Oakland or Scotland. It's not from Brantford. They already have pot shops. It's not from Simcoe. So squarely, all of those customers are coming from a radius of a driveway.
Thank you. Appreciate your answer.
No problem.
I would suggest to council that we've heard enough to make a decision. We could talk all night about it. I think the pot shop or the cannabis store, that ship has sailed. That's nothing to do with tonight at all. That's completely a different issue, and that's a provincial thing. And that's happened already. We're talking about a food cart, a food truck, which, you know, in the very name of being a food cart, no one should be surprised that it's going to serve food. I'm not sure that why anyone would be concerned about that. With that being said, if there's no other questions to the public and or the presenter, I would like to declare the public hearing closed. If I don't see any objection to that. And I'd like to turn it over to Councillor Wheat, please.
It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McAlpine that application ZBA 25/20/RC from Highway Grass Station Incorporated, 230 Oakland Road, be approved, and then I will speak to it, sir.
Thank you.
I'm not going to support this application. When you really read the recommendation that's printed before you, members of council, it's to change the subject lands from natural heritage to a temporary T96 zone. Now, I'm not going to go over everything that Mr. Johnson and the other gentleman has spoke. They're all listed in your package. I'm sure you've read them. There's numerous things there. But as we move forward with a plan, we're not going to be wanting to take portions of land out of natural heritage into something else. And we're going to be going through a lot of that moving forward with the official plan. Second, that's the basis that first of all, they've got to change the zoning before they can even apply for the truck. So we're putting the truck before the horse, the cart here before the horse. We've got to change the zoning, and I'm not in favor of taking natural heritage lands out for this. I could go over 4 or 5 pages that Mr. Johnson and Mr. Allen have prepared for you, but that's just being redundant. I can't support this. This reminds me of the application about a month ago where a private brewer to the south part of the county had already assumed that we were going to approve things and had a major article in the Saturday Expositor before we had even approved it. And this is the same thing here. They've moved the food truck in. I know it was there 2 weeks ago because I did a drive-by. Now I've heard tonight it's been there for perhaps 2 months, not 2 weeks. So they're really assuming things. They put up lighting, they've done trenching, they've done numerous things that are all listed without permission to do it. And I cannot support this, and I encourage other members of council not to support it, because we're opening a can of worms, because people are going to go ahead and do things and then beg for forgiveness after and say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I had to do that. But the crunch here is to rezone, take land out of natural heritage and put it somewhere else, and I cannot support that.
Thank you, Councillor Wheat. Anyone else want to speak to this? Councillor Howes.
Mr. Mayor, I'm still a little bit concerned about the pending GRCA commentary on this, and I'm not opposed to food trucks. I like food trucks. I'm not opposed
It's
to.
8 o'clock.
I'm not opposed to food trucks being in the parking lot of a store that sells cannabis. I mean, I don't drink when I'm in the parking lot of the liquor store. But I think that I think we're missing some information. This whole thing seems a little messy to me. It doesn't seem like a cut and dry decision. And if after we received the recommendation from staff, if between then and now there were changes to with commentary from the GRCA. And if we don't have all of that information, I still am thinking that we should defer this rather than vote on it tonight. And I tried to toss that out earlier, hoping for some commentary from staff, but that's just my thoughts. I can't support this application, but I would prefer to see it deferred rather than voted on tonight.
I would certainly entertain that motion, Councillor House.
Well, can I make a motion while there's a motion already on the table?
I believe you can.
A motion to defer is always in order.
Okay, then I move that we defer this till we have more information and seeking a seconder.
I think you have a seconder in Councillor Ferrier. Any other comments? I think this has been a very messy evening I received some photographs today that were very disturbing. Also, not that they weren't great photographs, but it's just, you know what, the cart before the horse is exactly perfect. Councillor Gatwood, what do you have to add?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes. I'll support the deferral, but I also would like an amendment to this recommendation, because if this goes forward, I feel that 3 years could be a 3-year nightmare for the county and by law enforcement.
Point of order. Point of order. We're just speaking to the motion, I believe.
Yes, I know.
The motion to defer.
We're voting on the motion to defer first, Councillor Gatwood.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just think 1 year is better. Yep. Go ahead.
All right, I'm going to call, are we all clear? Councillor Coleman? You're voting or are you commenting?
I'm commenting, Mr. Mayor. I will not support the deferral. I will not support the deferral, Mr. Mayor. I believe the information's in front of us. If GRCA would have had the information to us, that's not our problem tonight. It's not here, and I cannot take the word from somebody else. I will not support the deferral, and so I would like to vote on it and put this issue to bed one way or the other, because I think it's just deferring it. It's just delaying it for on and on and on. There's a whole lot of issues to deal with this situation, so I will not support the deferral. I would like to deal with it up front.
Councillor Ferrier?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just a question, I guess, for Ryan. I believe Ryan said in his presentation that staff Ryan Cummings, that there is something that came in today, just very late, from the GRCA. Can that be confirmed or clarified?
Ryan?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thanks. So, hearing the concerns of council, we did receive correspondence from Ashley Graham today that she's been on site as of, I believe, yesterday, and has some comments and would like to discuss with the proponent. I'd also like to make one thing clear, that I will make Ashley's original comments from a couple months ago available to council, just so we have the total package of information here as to how we arrived at this recommendation today. I'll be forwarding that around this evening.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. We have it seconded. Are there any other comments from any other councillors before we call the vote to defer?
Could I have a recorded vote, please, Mr. Mayor? Because we can't see how people are voting.
Madam Clerk, it's going to be a recorded vote, please.
Yep, sure can. So I will start with you, Councillor Gatward. Councillor Gatward? No. Councillor Coleman?
No.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Pierce?
Yes, to defer.
Yep, sorry, yes, to defer. Councillor Bell?
No.
Councillor House?
Yes, to defer.
Councillor LaFerriere?
Yes, to defer.
Councillor McAlpine?
Yes, to defer.
Councillor Wheat?
No.
The motion.
Wait, Mayor Bailey hasn't voted.
Oh, sorry, Mayor Bailey.
No.
Okay, the motion to defer fails. Tie vote.
So, Madam Clerk, what do we do from here?
We have the motion to approve the application on the table.
All right. Councillor Miller, Councillor Miller first.
Sorry, I don't want to speak for any other counselor, but I thought Councillor Gatwood was trying to make an amendment earlier before the deferral vote.
Councillor Gatwood.
Well, in case it passes, yes, I'd like to make an amendment that the temporary zone would be for 1 year.
Okay. It's amended.
We
Well,
need a
we-
seconder for the amendment.
Do we have a seconder for the amendment? Take it, Councillor Miller. Thank you. It's been seconded by Councillor Miller. Are you
And
ready?
a vote on the amendment.
Vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed to the amendment?
What's the, I'm not sure everybody voted, or I can't see all their hands. Could we do that again?
Yeah. All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed to the amendment?
Okay, the amendment passes.
Okay. Now we have to vote on the report, the recommendation.
Yep, as amended.
Councillor Wheat requests a recorded vote, please.
It's a recorded vote. Heather?
Okay, Councillor Wheat,
No.
Councillor McAlpine,
No.
I'm sorry, that was no.
Yes, it was no.
Sorry, Councillor LaFerriere,
No.
Councillor Howes,
No.
Councillor Bell,
No.
Councillor Pierce,
No.
Councillor Miller,
Yes to the motion as amended.
Councillor Coleman,
No.
Councillor Gatward,
No.
Mayor Bailey.
Sadly, no.
The motion is defeated.
Thank you. Moving on. Number 7A. Mount.
So,
Councilor Gatwood?
So, Mr.
Sorry,
Mayor, through you to the clerk, do we need a motion to refuse the application?
Because we are council, not approving the application is refusing it. It would be different when we were into committee structure.
If we were in planning. Okay, thank you.
Okay, 7A. Who has that?
Thanks,
That's me.
Mr. Mayor. Ryan's going to be presenting this one. Take it away, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you again. Good evening. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This application relates to the proposed cell tower from Shared Network Canada at 558 Mount Pleasant Road. The subject lands are located on the east side of Mount Pleasant Road, south of Phelps Road. Subject lands are approximately 17.6 hectares in size and are surrounded by agricultural and residential uses. Shared Network Canada proposes to build a 65-meter high wireless telecom tower on lands known as 558 Mount Pleasant Road. The applicant had previously brought forward this a previous revision of a plan to locate a proposed tower in May of 2019. The application was received in 2018 with consultation happening through September of 2018. This application was refused at the time by the committee, citing concerns of conflicts with neighboring residential land uses as a primary concern. The applicant then brought forward a revised plan with the location of a proposed tower to be moved to the southwest to address these concerns at the November 2019 Planning Committee. Further concerns were raised later that month at the November 2019 Council meeting by several delegations from outside of the standard circulation area. Ultimately, the motion to support this application was defeated, and Council directed staff to undertake a review of the county's telecommunications tower protocol, specifically focusing on new parameters for circulation, notices, and more visible signage. Staff note that circulation of the notices for this meeting, both by mail and newspaper, was undertaken in accordance with the County of Brant's revised protocol from 2020, which requires circulation of all neighboring property owners within 500 meters of the subject lands 30 days prior to this meeting. At this time, staff is recommending that Shared Network Canada has once again satisfactorily completed its consultation with the county. that the county is satisfied with the consultation process and does not require further consultation with the public, and that the county concurs with Shared Network Canada's proposal to construct this proposed tower, provided it's constructed in accordance with the plan submitted. This concludes my remarks. I believe Tracy from Shared Network Canada is available as well with a presentation.
All right. Can I just draw your attention, please, Council, to the fact that there is a petition attached as an addendum. Tracy, did you want to make a report? Councillor Ferrier first.
Sorry, just can I confirm with you, or maybe it's the clerk, but is that a petition we've seen before? I think the dates all say January 3rd, 2020.
The petition was submitted to my office in May of 2020, so I don't believe it's been circulated before.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for allowing the clarification, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Tracy, did you have a report for us?
No formal presentation. Happy to answer any question, but just to mention that this committee has approved this once before, but under the new protocol, we were happy to recirculate again, which we have done. I believe the focus was making sure that the residents of McGill Road were provided with necessary opportunity to comment. That circulation was completed, and we did include a photo simulation that was also included in the revised site selection report, which showed what the perspective would look like off of McGill Road. So I think that was helpful for the residents to understand what the visual impact would be. So we support administration's recommendation, and again, happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. I knew it was a McGill tract concern that we came back with. Councillor Galway, did you have a question before you went AWOL on us? There you go.
Yeah, yeah, my battery is dying and I'm trying to plug it in and make sure the cord's working. Sorry. Yes, I received, through you to Tracy, I received today an email from a resident in that area. And Mount Pleasant has a website where the community speaks about their concerns and so forth. And one of the residents sent that, and I don't go on that website. I'm not on Facebook a lot. It's a Mount Pleasant Facebook page. But one of the residents sent me several pages of complaints about the lousy service in that area. And I read through them today and I thought, wow, I didn't think Mount Pleasant was as bad as Oakland, where I can't even get my cell phone to ring in the house, or I have to hold my phone up to the window to send a text. So it appears that this tower is being put in to better serve the residents, Tracy. Has there been a lot of requests for increased service in this area, and I guess service improvements?
Yes, through you, Mayor and members of council. Thank you. Yes, I confirm that that's one of the site selection requirements that is taken into consideration. We look at the existing coverage, and this has definitely been identified as an unserviced area. The main three providers that are tenants to this tower tend to be Rogers, Bell, and TELUS. So that should help serve your community with sort of the most popular service providers.
Thank you.
Any other questions to Tracy? Thank you for coming back thank you for being here to answer our questions. I'm going to turn this over to Councillor Howes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Bell that the agenda, oops, sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Chambers, who's not here, so we need a different seconder.
Looking for Councillor Bell, thank you.
That staff report RPT 20-145 be approved as printed.
Councillor Coleman, did you have a question, or Councillor Coleman?
No, just a comment, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I didn't support this last time, Mr. Mayor, because I felt there was lack of communications in Mount Pleasant Road, McGill track area. So, but I think I've noticed that the sign has been up in front of the property for over the last month, And I think they tried to do their due diligence to make this work. And so I will support it this time and whatnot and go from there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman. Any other questions or comments before we call the vote? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Tracy, for doing that extra work for us. Number 8, please. These are staff reports. Councillor Pierce.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I had to get myself off of mute there. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Coleman, the staff reports RPT-20-157 for the update to the County of Brant bylaw cannabis production and processing be received as information.
Any questions, concerns? Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to confirm through you to staff the timeline that they've laid out in the report. They're saying we should see a report November next month. Given that we'd like to gauge the public, get some public input on this, it seems a little bit aggressive. But am I reading that correct? We expect to see something by the end of next month?
Ryan?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. We had planned to hold a public engagement session next week, which is the 14th. It'll be a Zoom meeting, not dissimilar to what our colleagues in policy have been working on with the ARUs and other projects. And that'll give us just under 3 weeks before preparing our report to the November 3rd committee meeting. So I think it gives us adequate time. You know, if there's any major concerns that come out of those consultation meetings, and obviously we'd encourage council to participate, then we can certainly pull it back another month. And you know, I'd ask Matt to confirm, but I think it's well within our timelines that we'd be able to have a recommendation by November.
Thank you.
Okay. No, I appreciate the answer, and don't get me wrong, I am all in favor of that aggressive timeline because from what we discussed in the past, we can't apply these retroactively to existing cannabis production sites. And as we look to Norfolk, where they're dealing with over 70 cannabis production sites, these things can pop up rather quickly. So yeah, I like the timeline. I just want to double check and make sure. So looking forward to it, Ryan. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ryan? Any concerns? Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. B, Councillor Miller.
Yep. Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Wheat. That staff report RPT-20-141. Feedback summary report on farm diversified uses be approved as presented.
Does anyone want to speak to that? Councillor LaFerriere?
Yes, I just had a question from last meeting on this, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to ask staff if possible.
Okay.
Through to staff, I'd asked about the potential that we might be double dipping on some developmental charges with particular farms that have, will have to, because of this, reapply and redevelop some of their properties, or already have, but haven't gotten that zoning for particular reasons because they were waiting for the plan and the diversified uses, and now they're going to have to go through the entire charge process again. It says in here, essentially, if I'm reading it right, just sort of it is what it is, and I just like to get staff to actually clarify that for us.
Who's here? Brandon, is he still here? Who's here to speak?
I believe Matt's willing to answer.
Okay.
Hello. Yes.
Hello.
Through the mayor to Councillor LaFerriere. So the planning fees wouldn't be required once this, if this eventually comes into play. Then what would happen is it would become an automatic permitted use. There would likely still be some form of a site plan applied to this kind of a use on a farm, just for safety purposes and public circulation, that sort of thing. But it would likely be a modified form of a site plan. We're working behind the scenes on coming out with a minor site plan process, and that would be something that we would apply to these forms of businesses. Development charges would still be something that would be applied to this new use on a farm, because basically you're taking something that would be considered agriculture today and adding a value, the valued use to it, similar to how like MPAC would assess these types of businesses. It could come in as either industrial or come in as commercial. In many cases, it's more of a commercial type of use, so the commercial development charge would apply. But that is consistent with how MPAC applies taxes and that sort of thing to these uses as well. Similar to the additional residential units, what we'll be doing is coming out with a pamphlet, some information to share with farmers, with residents of the rural countryside, with how these would work, how they'd function, how they could apply for them and implement them on their sites. And in that document, we would have the information provided so that they're fully aware of what to expect when they do implement something like this on site. Just, speaking to things like taxes, speaking to things like development charges, building permits, those kinds of details are really going to be what people need to hear in order to make those decisions.
And just one follow-up, if possible, Mr. Mayor, through you to Matt. And applicants, farmers, could still come to council and apply to have certain fees waived if we so feel that it's applicable to them.
Yep, through the mayor to Councillor Lafrey, yeah, that's correct. And I should also mention that there is the government did come out with an exemption that municipalities could apply to things like on-farm diversification. I don't believe that it exempts all of the land tax, but it exempts a portion of it. And luckily enough, when the government released that, Brant was one of the first municipalities in Ontario to jump on it and implement it. So from my understanding, this is something that farmers could apply for to have their tax reduced for things like on-farm diversification.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor, please. And opposed? Carried, thank you. Councillor Gatward, you have number 8C, I believe.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. It's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Bell, that staff report RPT 20-156, official plan update and amendment 1 to the growth plan, growth forecasts be received as information.
Questions? Councillor House first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Jennifer. I just want to make sure that I'm in my head, I'm trying to boil all of this information down to a couple of sentences in order to be able to speak with people in town about this. And we all know that growth in the county is a hot topic with residents, and certainly we hope to see lots of attendance at tomorrow night's town hall, where we discuss the upcoming official plan. Little plug for that event tomorrow night. Jennifer, am I correct in kind of boiling this down to the province? The province has always been mandating us to grow, and that the numbers that they are asking us to grow to have increased slightly, but it's approximately a 50% increase on top of our current almost 40,000 population. And that the one significant element of this report is that we now have an extra 10 years to accomplish the growth goal. I just want to know if I understand that part clearly.
Yeah, to Councillor House through the mayor. So yes, the province has revised Schedule 3 of the growth plan, which sets out the population and employment forecasts and it's now to 2051. So that was proposed Amendment 1, and as of August 28th, it's now in effect. So what that does is, as I came to you in August with various scenarios that the province had proposed, and what they went with was the reference scenario, which is actually slightly lower than the high forecast is what we were predicting, what I brought to you. So that's the 59,000 people by 2051. So currently in the county, there's approximately just over 40,000 people throughout the entire county. And this proposed forecast for 2051 is 59,000. But what the province has said and indicated that this is supposed to be a floor or a minimum forecast. So what the county has to do now is through our municipal comprehensive review, and there's some confusion because technically in the growth plan of 2019, the 2031 and 2041 still exists in reality, but they've eliminated it with the amendment. So what the county has to do is look at all the forecasting to 2051 and do our municipal comprehensive review and our land needs and determine if that's applicable for us. So it's technically a floor or a minimum, but we'll be coming to you probably at a special meeting of council with our growth scenarios, hopefully in December, which will outline all these different forecast scenarios for you. So, but in reality, we're not technically doubling the population because we're about 40,000 right now. That would make us to 80 because it's about 59,000 is what the forecast is for.
Councillor House?
Just following up then. So yeah, so a 50% increase in population, but the timeline for us to achieve that growth has been extended by 10 years, correct?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councillor, that is correct. We have an extra 10 years to do that. And that's the piece of information we don't currently have right now. And we're number crunching that as we speak with our consultant. So that is correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Pierce, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mine was just going to be a comment, and Councillor Howes beat me to it. I just wanted to remind everybody that's watching out there that there is the meeting tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Hope everybody's there.
Yeah. And Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Jennifer. I think we need to be really thoughtful about the use of the words forecasts and targets. In the world I used to work in, the target was set by somebody else. A forecast was our best view on what would turn out. And we might hit the target, we might not. But I think I understand that 59,000 is what we have to aim for, and hopefully we get there. I think I read somewhere that you said this allows us more flexibility. I'm struggling to see that because if I understand correctly, the 2031 and the 2041 targets remain. So whilst we have to get to 59,000 by 2051, we have to get to 57,000 by 2041. So the last 10 years are pretty easy going. I would like to think that we could just target the final number of 59,000 and work optimally and as most efficiently as possible to get there. Let's use the flexibility that we have. If you look at the employment forecast, it's even worse. I mean, you get to 2041 and we're at 26,000 and there's no increase between 2041 and 2051. So I think it's an odd kind of forecast. Any comments, Jennifer?
Through the mayor to Councillor Bell. And yes, Councillor Bell and I have talked about this as well. So in terms of the flexibility, what's happened is that a lot of greater Golden Horseshoe municipalities for the 2031 and 2041, some outer ring municipalities were not meeting the forecasts and some were overachieving them. So what they've done is technically the province has taken out 2031 and 2041 out of Schedule 3, the amendment. And I've talked to our consultant today, and what he says is that it's supposed to allow a municipality flexibility, because the thing is, we're supposed to update our official plan every 10 years, and the province redoes its population finance forecasting every 5 years. And we're currently in a disruptor of a pandemic. and it's skewing a lot of the numbers, and we don't know what the outcome is going to be in the next 5 years. So what this is doing is that it's actually rejigging the numbers from the midterm point. The province supplied them, but through our municipal comprehensive review, it's our job to revise them and get back to them with our numbers. So in terms of the mid-range, we do have flexibility, and we will be coming to you with that growth management package, hopefully in the next couple of months to do that. So thank you, Councillor Bell, that's correct.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. One further question. You mentioned a large number of requests to rezone from employment to residential. Can you clarify what that is in terms of acreage, and what percentage of our employment lands are at risk there?
Yes, through the Mayor, Councillor Bell. So what I've written in the report was more of a heads up, because what these updates are every month is to tell you some of the background work that's going on behind the scenes. So currently to date, we have 15 to date employment land conversion letter of intents, I call them. So we have employment lands, which is actually part of our forecasting scenario, and it's also part of our land needs assessment. And we actually have the sort of intents by landowners to convert the employment lands to either residential or other uses. So I'm giving you that information at this time. We'll have more information in the next couple months of what that means, because in the next few months, they have to submit a planning rationale with a criteria background analysis that our consultant will overview. Because we've rest assured that a lot of these conversion requests won't necessarily happen, because what it'll do is if someone's wanting to convert from employment lands to residential, it will increase our unit count for our forecasting numbers. So that's what's going to happen. So we have to be very cognizant of that if we have 10 conversion requests for residential, that these are going to be additional subdivisions coming online, and the unit counts will go up for our forecasting numbers. So I'll have that information for you in the next couple of months.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miller, you're next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And that's Councillor Bell. Nice segue from him to me, because that's what I wanted to ask Jennifer about. The employment needs, the employment lands needs. Is it the municipality that determines that amount under certain provincial guidelines? How's that number arrived at?
Through the Mayor to Councillor Miller. So that's actually part of our forecasting numbers. So traditionally, employment lands were supposed to generate a certain amount of jobs. And that's our forecasting number to 2051, which is the 26,000 jobs. But traditionally, what's happened with the land needs assessment is the province revised that methodology recently, because they acknowledge that not all jobs occur just on employment lands. And we're in some very different times at the moment, and the types of jobs and where people work are changing. So all of that information is being funneled through our land needs assessment to account for jobs that are not just on our designated employment lands. We do need them, because our employment lands are very important for commercial, for retail, for warehousing, and different means. I'm working hand in hand with strategic initiatives, Allison Newton's group. We're doing work together to ensure that we've got the proper information that we're giving to our consultant. So it is part of our forecasting work.
Okay, and that I get you touched on what I was going for. And everybody knows, a few people, I know at least a dozen people, that they don't drive to the office, like they used to. So I'm glad to hear maybe the way things look like they're heading will kind of be incorporated into that. So anything you can share for the next report on that, I'd really appreciate it, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Gatward, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Jennifer, those 15 requests for employment lands to be changed to residential, council would have the final say on whether or not we allow those changes. I can recall an instance where Brookfield requested an employment land change to residential, and it was granted. But our county of Brant needs industrial and commercial lands occupied and paying taxes to help keep our residential taxes down. We have lots of residential and growth, and residential properties cost the county money. Industrial and commercial help keep our taxes lower. So I just wanted to make that point so that we are very careful about reallocating or redesignating industrial or employment lands. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gatward. Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you, Jennifer, for being here to answer our questions. Seeing no other questions, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Number 9 is communications. I see none. Number 10 is other business. I didn't ask. Is there any other business? I should have given you the opportunity. No. Seeing none, we'll move on to number 11, please. And I'm going to turn that over to Councillor McAlpine.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor LaFerrier that the County of Brant County Council convene in camera to discuss litigation matters affecting the municipality and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege with the solicitor Marcus Davison and Peter Tice, consultant in attendance Valerie Holmes, LPAT appeal, and official plan amendment number 8, and cannabis licensing.
All right. All those in favor? Moving camera. Opposed? We are in camera. Councillor LaFerrier.
Let me unmute. There we are. Yes, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Howes that bylaws number 102-20 to 111-20, excluding 108-20, be read for the first time.
All vote. All those in favor? First reading. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Howes, the bylaws number 102-20 to 111-20, excluding 108-20, be read a second time and all clauses and preambles adopted.
Thank you for the second. Is there any questions for the bylaws after the second? No. No questions. All those in favor? Call for the third reading, please, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Howes that bylaws number 102-20 to 111-20, excluding 108-20, be read a third time, passed, signed, and executed.
Thank you. After the third reading, all those in favor? Thank you.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, did that exclude the grass highway bylaw?
108-20, yes.
Yes.
As read 3 times.
Yeah. But the bylaw for the food truck was excluded.
108-20, yes.
Yes.
Sorry. Thank you. I'm just rattled because of what happened with my computer.
That's
Thank
okay.
you.
It's late, Councillor Gatwood. You have the right to be rattled. Number 13 on the agenda is the next meeting. It could be the call of the chair at this point. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Pierce and Councillor Howes. Thank you. Everyone stay safe. And we'll see you again very shortly, I'm sure.
Good night, all.
You too, Ms.